Welcome to episode 3 of the Weight Watchers show. Who knows what will happen? We will find out, as we always do in these live shows. My name is Terry Corby. I'm the founder of Good Business Pays. You know us by now, the campaigning organization set up to bring an end to late and slow payment to small businesses. This is the 3rd episode of our show. And today what we're talking about is a bit of a pet subject of mine. It's about the large scale, I think they might be called in the business world BSM platforms, business supplier management systems, also supplier systems or payment systems, the likes of Ariba and Cooper and Microsoft 365, those systems that we have to battle with as smaller suppliers to try and get paid. And as I've often said to folks, getting paid through these big systems is a bit like having open heart surgery without an anesthetic. I have had heart surgery, so I do know what that means, but I did have anesthetic. But it was a bit like that, trying to get paid using one of these large payment systems. And I wanted to understand, is this by design? Have they been designed to be complicated so that bigger companies can hold on to money for longer? Or something else, maybe just badly designed? And so I wanted to understand if we could learn some lessons and bring in some experts from the world, for example, of consumer banking and consumer payments. And so we have hopefully 3 guests today. We certainly have one on screen already with us, Wayne Foster from Open Banking. Open banking is something that we hear a lot about, but I have to say, we probably don't know a lot about what it is. You know, how does it work? I certainly didn't really know that much about what it is and how it works, and actually that we're using it most of the time. But I do think that some of the lessons that have been taught by open banking and the things that have brought to consumer payments, can we learn anything from that in the B2B world? So welcome to you, Wayne. Thank you for being the first person to arrive on the show. Tell us about open banking, the organization, your role, and maybe you can give us a sort of idiot's guide, for me anyway, to what open banking is, and in particular, how it applies to the B2B world. Thank you.
Absolutely. Good morning, Terry, and also to our listeners. As Terry said, I belong at Open Banking Limited, which was formerly known as the Open Banking Implementation Entity in the UK. A little bit of background of what open banking is, it probably is worth just stepping back to 2016 when the Competition and Market Authority did a review of the retail banking sector, and it found that there was a lack of account switching taking place. There was also a barrier to competition, and also a lack of choice and innovation in this sector. And so then in 2017, there was something called the PSD2, or Payment Service Directive 2, which was a piece of legislation that came out from Europe, which implied that banks needed to deploy open banking. They were required to open up their payment services, also the account data for consumers with the consent of those consumers, and share it with third-party providers. And so that was kind of the catalyst for open banking. The CMA, who are the Competition Market Authority in the UK, on the back of the review, and also with PSD2 coming into play, they decided to stand up a UK entity to implement open banking. And this came along with a mandate. So the 9 largest banks in the UK were part of that initial implementation, and they also funded it. And so open banking, or OBIE back then, they were tasked with really 3 key parts. First was to build the standards and create them along with protocols. Then also to build the trust services, which would ensure that only trusted and regulated third-party providers and banks could play in this space. And then also to see that it was deployed across those banks and third-party providers in a consistent and standardized way to obviously give consistent user journeys for consumers. And so if we kind of fast forward a little bit to 2018, After kind of building it, we then went live with our very first API call taking place in January 2018. And then if we kind of take a little bit of a hop, skip and jump to the present, we're now seeing over 13 million users a month using open banking services, and we recorded over 25 million payments, of which 3.2 million were variable recurring payments in the month of January. And this is growing month on month, year on year, and I truly believe the best is yet to come. Hopefully that gives you a little bit of background to open banking. This applies to retail bank accounts and also business bank accounts, so it's very obviously pertinent for today's call.
But I imagine that it relies on the consent of sharing quite a lot of data. I suppose that's part of the underlying thing. And when we get into the conversation about, in particular, how in business consumer sense, you know what you're sharing, or hopefully you know what you're sharing, B2B gets a bit more complicated. Is that right in terms of saying that it relies on a lot of sharing of data, and does open banking allow itself well to be in the B2B space? I suppose the question is.
So absolutely, consent is absolutely in the center of all of this. So any data that is shared with a bank or with a third-party provider is consented by the end user, so by the person who owns that account, whether it be a business or whether it be an individual. And that consent can be varied depending on what its use is, time, and so there's a lot of flexibility there to customize it to the use case that is designed to be used for that service. And so, yeah, lots of opportunity, but the core is absolutely explicit consent is required to share information or to complete a payment using open banking.
Brilliant, thank you. Giulio, welcome. Welcome to the show. So you are, or Previse, of course, has sort of pioneered the era, I think, of called algorithm-based decision-making around invoices. So that sounds very complicated and easy and simple in terms of speeding up the process. I see you nodding your head as Wayne was talking about the benefits of open banking, but you live in the world of procurement and payments. What's your view on particularly these big company systems? And my opening question, which is, are they designed to make it more complicated? And how do you think open banking and all the things you're doing can help? Tell us about Previse and what your views are on that.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, at Previse, we really try to simplify the whole process of paying suppliers without removing the controls that are required. And we do that using data, indeed. Yes, based on what your statement was hinting, sometimes the processes are not the most straightforward in particularly large corporate, and they are there for a reason. There are a lot of controls that are rightly so needs to be there to make sure that people that are not allowed make payment to parties that are not supposed to receive cash. So of course all the controls are there for a reason. What we've seen in the past and what we've seen until now, there has been a really quite slow adoption on innovation on changing the processes. So all the ERPs, what they've done throughout the last 20, 30 years of history is just replicating what was a traditional process or a paper process, making it maybe faster, using EDI, using different method for delivering the information. But in principle, if you analyze what the process was a long time ago, it still is the same process today. In order to trigger a payment, there has to be certain element of validation that needs to occur in the process, and there has to be certain element of manual interaction as well in the process. So you will have your three-way match, your two-way match, and so on before actually the payment is triggered. And what Previse does, and where I think there are similarities with the concept of open banking, we look at the data from all the parties involved in the transaction and try actually to predict that element of check that is done and accelerate the cash upfront to the supplier with the ability, of course, of offsetting later on if the process, once it comes to an end and all the checks are made, identifies that there are net off or overpayment being made. But what we really do is we use all the data that is available in the process, looking at the data to anticipate the cash flow and provide a benefit to the supplier, while the process continues its course and all the checks are being done. Because there is a possibility to actually use the data to infer certain element and therefore predict the payment. And that's what we do. Today, we're able to pay in a similar way in which you pay for a coffee in a Starbucks, where you wouldn't say, well, let me wait for the taste of the coffee, and I want to wait for I made an order, I need to match what I wanted with what I've received and so on. You just pay for the coffee, and the cash later on is taken off from your bank account. So we have a similar concept, but we apply that to the B2B transaction. And I think that can be made if data is made available and is shared across the parties. And what we're seeing is most of the time, the different parties are willing to share the data in order to receive the benefits. And here the benefits is a more efficient cash flow between the parties. Does it make sense?
Yeah, it kind of, I've got a couple of questions follow up there. One, which is, and by the way, if anybody's watching that has any questions, that knows a lot more about procurement and payments than me, please do ask, because my questions might be a bit basic. But one of the questions I had, Giulio, was, it kind of sounds like, well, the systems are too big and complicated, they take a long time, so let's create a workaround. So you create effectively a workaround because the systems are so complicated that then pays everybody fast, which I like. I really like the idea, by the way, because the whole point of Good Business Pays is getting people paid fast. But, you know, essentially it's layering on a complex system in order to say, forget all of those complicated procurement and processes you've got. You can stick with your old long and slow systems, but we'll make sure the supplier gets paid fast. Is that kind of what it's about?
It's yes, it's not a complicated solution that is laid on. I think the solution is quite, we worked a lot to make it simple, but what it does, it doesn't require a change in the processes. And the most difficult part of actually accelerating the payment and changing the way in which things are done is indeed changing the process, changing the people, and making sure that the people that change continue actually acting and behaving according to the new rules. Even if you were to change a process today, we've seen, for example, with master records, we clean a lot master records. We see a lot of records and data that is not correct in the ERP in the first place. And the easiest solution is just sometimes to actually have the workaround, because is more difficult to drive change across large organization, while the data can help you implementing the change without any complicated, large, big project. So we really believe that the element of using the data to drive the difference behavior is what is happening in the world. You see AI, you see LLM, you see there are a lot of places. We started 10 years ago when LLM wasn't there, but the concept is the same. We try to use data to drive solution and support processes rather than just changing the process in the old way.
And Wayne, was going back to the sort of opening principles or beginning principles of open banking, was that really also to drive a behavior change in terms of the way people use payment in their life, or was it efficiency? What were the reasons for doing it in the first place? We're talking about culture change here.
Yeah, so the original ask, I guess, was to improve the security of electronic payments. That was one of the first kind of drivers to spark innovation in this space, to provide better choices. Probably at that point in time, we wouldn't have known kind of what the services and the innovation would deliver, because obviously it was just a piece of paper at that time. So then you had to build the ecosystem. And our role was really to enable this trust environment, to be able to share data, to be able to make payments. The smart bit, the clever bit is the fintechs, the companies that would build services and take the data and be able to do something clever with it to offer great services and better user experiences in a secure way that is all consent driven. And so I think with all these things, when you start out, are we in the finished place where we think actually open banking's delivered everything that we wanted it to? I think there's a lot more innovation, there's a lot more products and services that will grow. And on the back of that, we're kind of looking towards open finance and smart data schemes. And so to Giulio's point around data, the data is at the center of all of this, along with consent. So if there's more standardized data formats to really allow this to grow into new markets and to cross verticals, if you like, share data across many verticals to be able to give better customer experiences, journeys, products and services, that's where you're really going to see the kind of sum of all parts playing a key role. And probably, obviously, Fliss has just joined the call now, and so from a regulated provider's position, that's where the innovation takes place, along with Giulio, who's really got probably the best view of what open banking really means to them. Hi, Fliss, by the way.
Hi there.
Oh, let me turn to Fliss. Well, welcome, Fliss. Sorry you had problems joining. It's good to see you and hear you. Just for everybody joining Fliss Berridge, I think I read your profile. It was a musician and a lawyer and certainly an expert in fast payments, which is what we love at Good Business Pays, of course. And so far, just to bring you up to speed, you know, the exam question that I've been trying to put in front of people is these big company payment systems in the B2B world. They seem to be very complicated to us outsiders, overcomplicated, which slow down the payment process, make it difficult to get paid. You get the full stop in the wrong place, and you can wait weeks before you find that out, and then you start again. It's all very, you know, user quill and antiquated, despite the fact that they're supposed to be modern and wonderful. I wanted to know if that was by design, or is there something we can change? Is it a cultural thing? Is it a tech thing? And we've heard obviously from Wayne about open banking and where that came from. We've heard from Giulio, whose world is B2B and in the nuts and bolts of procurement and payment. Now, your company has been at this for quite a long time and definitely understands the value of open banking in certain markets. We've heard actually, I know you give a really good description, and I asked you when we did the briefing call to talk about open banking. Wayne's done that. But in particular, tell us about what Ordo do, of course, but also then how you think the work that you do can apply to the world of B2B. Welcome.
Great. Thanks very much, Terry. It's good to be here. So Ordo is an open banking payments and increasingly data platform, and we offer a variety of solutions that use this newer, I'm not going to say newer technology that enables businesses to collect payment in a hugely secure manner, instantly, and lower cost than card payments, for example. It is incredibly easy to use. It's all built on APIs, and Ordo certainly has built our technology specifically with ease of business integration in mind. We've did lots of research when building our solutions and our app and platform, and I can go into that if you want, on the end user customer friendliness and the intuitive journeys down to what color should go where, etc. But front and foremost of our mind when building our platform was we don't want to just be a technology company. Our greatest expertise isn't in technology. In fact, We wanted to build a platform that provided a business service. So we describe our platform as a fully hosted and managed open banking payments and data platform. And the reason I emphasize that is because in all of our build and in all of the way we work and interact with our customers is entirely, how can we make this a service for you? How can we make it as easy as possible for businesses to use? Basically, you just give us your colors and your logo, we drop it into our platform, and a business can get going pretty quickly. Now, you asked your exam question, it's a very good exam question. Is it tech or is it culture? So on the tech side first, I've just explained we set out to build and run a service, not just tech, not just APIs. So I would say to businesses, procuring businesses, look at who you procure your open banking payments solutions from. Is it a tech heavy company? And there are lots of techies and you'll probably get good technology from them, and that's it. Or do you want a more business service? Look at where the founders have come from, look at their background, look at how they choose to, what they choose to emphasize in their service. And is it more a service that's more holistic? And you will get the same high standard, secure, low cost tech, but you'll also get a lot more support, and the build is likely to be a lot fuller and richer, so that a business can just drop it in and plug and play in effect. And so our tech, all fintech's tech for open banking is built on APIs. And APIs aren't new. That's why I said at the first instance, newer technology. I did a Google search this morning, basis of all good research, verified to the end. A Google search said, and I asked the internet, when was the first API? And I got various answers. One of the answers was in the 1940s to build a library catalogue. So 1940s, APIs aren't new. A different answer, because that was maybe an early API, a different answer was in 2000 when Salesforce started using an API. So APIs in this technology is not new. It's not, we're not at the bleeding edge of technology anymore. And so businesses, corporates, medium-sized businesses, large businesses to take on and integrate this technology, it's not at the risky end of innovation here. It is standard, secure technology. So that's what I'd say on the tech side. And then to answer the culture side, I'd say for businesses, what do they want to be known for? What do they want their legacy to be? Do they want it to be legacy platform can't do anything, it's all too hard, sorry, it's our legacy technology? Or do they want it to be very much a demonstration of their customer centeredness and their willingness to be open-minded and investigate new technology that will help their customer streamline these processes and ultimately lower costs for all the suppliers down the chain?
So, I mean, I've worked in very big companies and some very small ones as well. And I do know that one of the things that worries people who work in bigger companies is the level of risk they take on when they invest, let's say, in some new technology that looks a bit risky and might mess up the system, or might, you know, sort of, if we plug it into our big, dependable, no one ever gets fired for hiring IBM system, what will happen? And so I'm wondering if everything that I've heard so far about open banking and instant pay and all the work you're doing, if it's that easy and good, why isn't it just happening? Because we are we're in a world in the B2B area. When I give presentations, we show that in the late 1980s and early 1990s, people were writing in the newspapers saying it's awful. Companies are taking 50 or 60 or even 70 days to pay. I have to say now, with all of this tech and accounting stuff that's come on and laws have changed, we're now taking 80, 90 or over 100 days to pay 40 years later. So there's some blockage in the tubes somewhere, and maybe some of the procurement professionals watching this might want to call in and say, you know, why don't you just do this stuff? But any views from any of you actually on, you know, why this isn't moving faster? What is the blockage that we need to change?
And you're absolutely right, Terry, that questioning and nervousness about a third-party provider, a TPP, to just get some acronyms in there, hooking up to systems, won't that compromise them? Won't that bring in a point of risk and vulnerability? And the answer to that is absolutely not. All fintechs that provide payment initiation and account information, so open banking payments and data services, have to be authorized and regulated by the FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority. And for example, in Ordo being authorized in 2018, 2019, we got our authorization in 2019. We had to submit our business plan, our security frameworks, how our platform and technology worked. It was all assessed by the FCA. We got various questions from various departments, so different people who knew what they were looking at and knew what they were talking about and knew what to ask us. And also us as business people running Ordo, we were all background checked and our CV submitted to check that we had the correct, between us, mix of skills needed to be running a financially authorized platform. And we have ongoing reporting and management to do throughout the year, every year. So that oversight and that checking is maintained. So there isn't a security risk or vulnerability. The point of APIs is, their entire point is to enable new and innovative functionality to be added onto existing systems. So that the whole point of APIs and regulated fintechs is to be that safe, secure, robust, additional enablement of functionality.
So, and thank you. And I think actually, funny enough, we were talking about that, and June Burke, I think, probably wrote the very question that I asked from some professional in the field, that security was a worry. And I do understand that when you're in a big company. Now, just come back to you, Giulio, for a second on this. We talked about, the work that Previse does, which is essentially, you pay the small supplier today, but you allow the big customer to retain their long payment terms, and then they pay you after 90 days or 100 days or whatever the number happens to be, right? So very little needs to be changed. I'm not sure with other open banking approaches whether it means the money disappears out of my bank account today. I'm talking about the big customer now, right? So do I lose the money today, or do I keep the money for 3 months? Because that is always one of the things that a lot of big companies like, is the working capital in their big company stays in their big company. This, and trying to understand the problem here, Giulio, is what you're doing trying to please both customers? I pay the small one fast, but allow the big customer to keep the money for as long as possible. And then after you've given that answer, I wonder if Fliss might talk about, it is, I wouldn't say your approach, but other approaches that the money disappears today, right? Because you can see that that's a very different proposition. Giulio first, and then maybe back to Fliss.
Yeah, so the platform itself is configurable, and you can indeed set it up with a revolver or a funding, so that the money leaves the bank account or actually arrives on the bank account of the small suppliers on the day in which the payment is triggered by our platform, and then later on the large customer will pay back. That's similar to product that have been there for tens and tens of years, reverse factoring and so on. And these products are there for a reason, because working capital is key for large companies. But those controls that we discussed earlier, they make the ability of using this type of solution of reverse factoring and supply chain finance more difficult for the small, medium suppliers, because unfortunately in the chain of approval, in the chain of the workflow, these are the last invoices that typically gets approved. We're seeing a difference between 20 to 60% delays more on the smallest supplier and invoices in the approval workflow, is simply because of the processes. And therefore these small suppliers, they typically are not the ones selected for this large reverse factoring supply chain finance program. And the reason why these supply chain finance programs are there is because large companies still need to manage their working capital. They have to. They have clear direction, and the working capital account payable has been one of the key levers to manage working capital, willing or not. There have been extension of terms throughout in the last 20 years, and therefore that typical need of paying later in the large company stays there. And but we try to make sure that the smaller supplier are not impacted by that need, and particularly they can benefit of the cost of capital that the large buyers are able to negotiate in the supply chain finance deals, so that supply chain finance solution typically provides funding rates which are multiple times cheaper of what a small medium supplier would be able to. So rather than just paying to terms, using the solution in accordance and in conjunction with the supply chain finance products, enable the supplier to receive cash earlier than what they should have, and therefore provide a revolver and a funding facility for the smaller supplier to finance their business and grow their business, and also finance those large buyers that unfortunately don't pay on time, which sometimes happens. So the element of timing is key. Most of our product is actually deployed in conjunction with a funding solution. It can be a card on the card rail, or it can be a supply chain finance solution. We work with banks, and because of that, there is a lot of scrutiny. So I want to go back to what Fliss was saying, is most of the fintech not only are approved by the financial regulation bodies, but because you're working with banks, you have to go through years of product approval. There is a very, very extensive scrutiny that all the banks do to the fintech before they can adopt them. And therefore there's also the security of the fact that we work within a security network in a secure environment, end to end through. It's not just the data, the single data. And the issue about the data also in the security, the data flows, but is also deleted as well once it's not used. So the elements of encryption and so on, but some of these transactional data doesn't persist on the network as well. It's just passing through. So there's an element of security in terms of timing of residence of the data too.
Fliss?
Well, Terry, you talked about money disappearing out of an account on the day. I'd not use that word, and I'd rephrase it, because it comes to the fundamental nature of what's happening with money, how it is treated and how it's transferred, and how this, as Giulio was saying, how this ecosystem has been built and put together, thanks largely to people like Wayne and people at Open Banking Limited. So thank you very much to all of them that work very hard and make this ecosystem work. Money doesn't disappear. It is authorized to go out of the payer's bank account, and it goes in accordance with standards. And the banks interpret those standards slightly differently. So it gives us fintechs things to do. But largely speaking, standards, the money is securely transferred from the payer's bank account to the business collecting payment in real time or instantly. So it's not about money disappearing. Money is securely transferred. And I think that if we look at this from two different themes, one is the plight of small and medium businesses, SMEs. Ordo did some research a while ago for small and medium enterprises, and we found out that business owners spend nearly 10 hours a week on accounting and payments tasks, and that contributed to 42% of business owners saying their most hated task was the accounting and payment side of it. And that is really shocking, where people are putting their hard blood, sweat and tears into trying to run their business. And the smaller you are, the harder it is to survive in capitalist business. They're putting their blood, sweat and tears into running their business, and then they've got this accounting and payment stuff to do, usually at the end of the day, outside of their business operating hours, to manage this side of their business that should just work. No one really wants to, unless you're a geek in payments like me and Wayne, no one wants to think about payments. You just want it to happen. You send out your invoice and you expect to get paid, and that is how it should work. And there's a point about what, again, coming on to my earlier comment, what businesses want to be known for, legacy systems or a legacy of customer centricity. And we live in a society today where most of our lives can be carried out from this computer we have in our hands these days. Finances are done on your phone. Finances are done on the run, on the go. You can look in your banking app at any moment and see exactly the amount of money you've got available, be that cash flow for a business or how much is available for you to spend as a consumer personally. And so our payments and finance and management ought to match today's society, where we can do everything on the go from our phone accurately and instantly. And that's what open banking gives you. And if you as a business can then offer that to your customers, that is a selling point and that is an advantage. Pitch yourself corporate as the corporate to work with, the corporate to do business with, the corporate that's up with the 21st century and today's living in a dynamic world. I think that would win you a lot of business and help you stand out. And it doesn't cost you anything extra. It does mean your money flows will be on a tighter and quicker turnaround. But the small business customer, their cash flows and turnaround times for money management are much more tense and on a tighter string than a corporate. So it's about, what does a corporate want to be known for, and does a corporate want to be reflecting today's immediate and dynamic society?
Yeah, and I guess the cynical side of me is a company wants to be known for its profits and its success in the market it operates in and the products it creates. And we've done a few of these shows, interestingly, where we found out that, for example, the procurement function, which of course is a lot of the audience that will be looking at this, will be measured on their ability to be able to save the company money. And part of that is retaining cash in the world of finance. So we've got a very tricky set of value propositions to build in order for people to understand the value to them. I do understand the value of, what do you want to be known as a company that deals with new technology and pays its suppliers? Customers is a different thing, of course. Offering your customers brilliant stuff.
Yeah.
Lots of companies will want to do that. When they turn in the other direction, I often talk about payment culture as how companies behave when you're not looking, because they're really talking then to the suppliers who are backstage, and they don't always behave in the way you'd like them to with suppliers in the way that they would customers. And so I'm quite interested. I know we've got a few people on who live in the world of procurement to see whether this kind of stuff resonates from a perspective of your day job. And if so, what, I guess the word objections you would have, because on one hand, it feels brilliant. Why wouldn't we just do this? In fact, why don't we get rid of Cooper and Ariba and 365 and just have Ordo and Previse and open banking, get rid of the rest? Yes, there's somebody's got to tick something that says, yes, I did buy that, sort of car for the company or what have you. But once that's done, it's just about payment. Wayne, I don't know if this is an area, obviously you look up the ecosystem of open banking and development. Is there something in that which means the messaging is not getting through, resonating, landing with people in the B2B community in the way that perhaps it has in the B2C world?
I was listening and it's very interesting. I made a couple of points and I thought that from an open banking perspective, there's a couple of things you touched on. One was around obviously the secure and trust of open banking. So kind of expanding a little bit on Fliss's kind of overview is every payment has a strong customer authentication in there. So the person making the payment or the business making the payment is aware they're making the payment for the sum of cash that they've signed up to. So there's no surprises there. Also, we spoke about all entities are regulated in this space to operate. If an entity was to say that the company was dissolved, or they lost their regulatory permissions, we can turn that off instantly, because there's certificates that sit behind that we can effectively turn off like a switch. So software statements and certs can be revoked, and those, whether it's account access or making payments, they would instantly stop, which is a great safeguard. And it's not like other potential payment mechanisms. It may take a while to kind of turn off. We can do it really quickly, same day, within minutes. So that's a good safeguard. I think also when it comes to payments, this all sits around the culture of the business, because the tools are there to pay businesses fast, to make refunds quick. Whether it's through cards, all right, there's a few days delay, which open banking doesn't have, but you can make a BACS, CHAPS, a card payment, or refund through open banking, and they're all pretty quick, yeah. But it's down to culture, and certainly from my background, not speaking as an OBL person, but speaking from myself of running my own business, etc. in the past, you make a decision whether you want to pay your suppliers on time, and whether your business has got the cash flow to be able to do that. And some of it is culture. So there's businesses there that have a rule in place that will pay their suppliers on 30 days, 6 days, 90 days, 120 days. So that's a decision. So the technology can pay everyone instantly. And I would probably imagine some businesses have obviously large sums of cash going through, and so they make interest or they gain revenue from the interest on that large sum of cash. And so that's the bit that needs to change. If a business wants to pay people on time every time, they can do that today. So I think that's kind of the key takeaways for me. That sits with that organization. I also think it's good that open banking allows businesses to provide better UX, which is what Fliss was talking about, and Giulio. This is at the core, to make it simple, to make it more consistent, and to be easy consumed. And this is really important, not just for open banking, but when you look at other verticals and scaling up, the more consistent we can get, and we talk about standards and standardization of our standards. There are many different flavors of our standards, because the market, just to give you an example, we're on 4.0 of the open banking standard. There's 11 flavors of 3.0, from 3.1 to 3.11, and banks can be on different versions of those standards, which requires companies like Fliss at Ordo to be able to integrate on different versions of those standards. And so there is a requirement, I would say, where you want to try and standardize that, so people are on more recent standards, to give that consistency of what products and services are available, and also the actual customer journey itself is more consistent, because each version of the standard typically will not just fix errata type errors, but also brings more functions and opportunities for TPP to offer more products. So if a bank supports a newer version of the standard, they can then potentially engage with variable recurring payments to be able to refund payments. They would be able to provide things like transactional risk indicators to reduce the risk of payments by sharing data between sending and receiving banks. There's lots of rich data there that can really maximize the potential for open banking payments in the future. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of flavor of what I'm thinking, listening to obviously both Fliss and Giulio on the call, and yourself, Terry, and hopefully that answers a little bit of your question that you were driving at.
Yeah, and I was going to ask Fliss, can you do two things? One thing is, give me a really good example in the B2C world of where we're using open banking successfully, probably regularly, and don't even know about it, i.e. it's sort of invisible. And also how you think that experience could be replicated in a B2B. It may not be real life today, but replicated in the B2B situation?
Sure. So I will I can give you a couple examples of the B2C for single payments and recurring payments, and let my brain churn away for how that transfers over into B2B. So we have a small company in the hospitality and leisure, shall we say, sector. This company organises running races, a topic very close to my heart, being a runner, injured runner at the moment, but runner nevertheless. And this person integrated Ordo onto their payment page. Us crazy runners sign up and pay money to run around an area a few times and get timed doing it. And this company was obviously being small, paying quite high card costs. So it was costing him a lot out of the revenue he was generating. So he integrated with Ordo. Our costs are per transaction way below 80% saving on card payments. And he integrated Ordo and it worked well. And he started getting a few of these race entries via open banking. And then he said to us, how can I get more of my traffic through open banking rather than cards? Because it saves me so much money. So our team, our product team, helped him with just some messaging on his payment page, putting open banking payment option first above the card payment option, and then 2 lines of message. My preferred payment method is open banking or pay by bank, whatever he called it, because it saves me money and it helps me put on races for you at a lower cost. That increased his traffic without having to give rewards or loyalty points or discounts, without costing him any money, increased his traffic to open banking rather than cards, by about something like 40%. He's pretty pleased now. He gets regular sign-ups through open banking and the end-to-end journey is smooth and there's little abandonment rate. That's for single payments, where it works really well. We've got another customer of ours called Moneyline, my favorite customer, and they're a CDFI, a not-for-profit short-term credit and lending business or organization, and they advance lower value loans to people on a short-term basis for trying to cover those bumps in life's road, like a broken washing machine, or you didn't get as many 0 hours tips and contracts this week, so you can't cover this unexpected expense. And along with having tools like a financial toolkit and a calculator, they use Ordo's single repayments solution and our variable recurring payment solution. Variable recurring payments is open banking's version of a smart direct debit. So it's just as secure as direct debits, but each payment can be a varied amount within agreed guardrails between the organization and the consumer. So with direct debit, providing a business like your energy company, for example, gives you notice of, we're going to be taking more this month because we all know energy has gone through the roof. They can take any amount. Whereas with open banking's variable recurring payments, high and low guardrail payments are set in advance in agreement between consumer and business, and those amounts can't be taken either more frequently or above the maximum amount agreed. And what it means for a credit and lending business or organization is that borrowers can repay different amounts according to what spare income they have or less income they have per week, per month, which means either if they need to pay less 1 week or 1 month, they avoid charges of a direct debit failing or bouncing or having to cancel an arrangement and put it back in place. And it means if they have extra funds available to pay, then they can lower their cost of capital and lower their cost of interest paid overall. So it's a flexible and controllable method of payment that responds to people's lives and responds to things that happen in life, because things do have a habit of happening in life to us, usually at the most inopportune moment. The full amount always remains owing from the consumer to the organisation, but it just means it's a more successful and manageable relationship between the consumer and organisation, and it's more likely to survive, and those full amounts of bills get repaid over a set duration. So how can that translate in a B2B environment? Well, if a business is supplying a business with products and services that may go up and down in cost, there may be additional services that get bolted on. You might need, if you're providing a technology service, there might be an enhanced release that needed to be worked on, or there might be a critical event that was a P1, a priority one situation that needed to be dealt with, that needed more developer or resource on for your contract for that moment. So there could be varying amounts that a business owes another business, and using open banking, particularly variable recurring payments, that can be flexed and easily and conveniently, with low maintenance and low person power of adjusting all of this. It can be easily tolerated with open banking. Or for single payments through open banking, an instant top up can be made between a business. And because all these payments have the capability to move instantly, this can be done very dynamically, and at last minute there can be, we needed to get an extra person in on this, and we can cover that cost, cover that extra resource in the moment.
That's now that sounds quite interesting, and I should imagine many AP teams and teams in big companies will be thinking the ability to be able to flex and do things fast like that, and have variable recurring payments that might even help with things like duplicate payments to vendors without having to take vendor credit notes and things like that, offers quite a bit of flexibility. I should imagine that for a big company, security within their own systems in their own company is still going to be one of the concerns there, right? So, you know, I'm talking about their own internal security, making sure they haven't got any bad apples inside the big company, and that they're sticking with processes, etc. I mean, you know, come back to Giulio, you're in the world of B2B here. Does this sound like something that where you could actually start to shape the benefit to the big customer?
Sure, and I think it's down to the benefits, and we work a lot with procurement professionals when we roll out our product, and building on what Fliss was mentioning, I think is down to creating a full picture of the cost of ownership of the business relationship between the suppliers and the buyers and the large customer, right? So we often see that if you look at the things in silos, terms tend to be moved as a tool, but actually terms and acceleration can be used to develop new suppliers, can be used to create working project to develop specific products and provide a cash liquidity. And overall is a net benefits between the parties, because as I mentioned, the cost of funding of a large corporate typically is lower than the cost of funding of a small corporate or a small SMBs or more small supplier. And therefore, by looking at the total cost of ownership, there is that realization moment that the product that you buy today at 60 days includes 15% of per annum cost of working capital included in the cost. And what happens if you are able to say, can I make that cost becoming 7%? What is the return for me as a procurement professional? And in that way, you're not just able to promote a good behavior of paying suppliers smaller, but you're able to bring on benefits, P&L benefit on as a large buyer. And we do that all the time when we work together with presenting the solution to the small supplier and medium suppliers. And therefore, you provide that cash advance at a cheaper rate that returns either in longer terms for the buyer, or indeed in P&L benefits for the buyer. So it is really a win-to-win if you start to see the businesses and the cost that each business has as a whole chain rather than individual costs, and they cannot be acted upon, or individual lever that cannot be acted upon. I don't know if it makes sense there.
Yeah. And just a straightforward question, because we're in the last few minutes, by the way, from June. It's one for Fliss. It says the banks validate names against bank account numbers and sort codes. How does that work with AutoPay?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's exactly what happens. So it's pretty impossible to pay the wrong person. So when a business wants to be paid, it will send out a however it utilizes its payment collections requests. It can be a pay now button or a URL behind be it the URL link or behind a QR code in a text message or WhatsApp or email. And then upon clicking that pay now button or URL or whatever it is, the payer is taken to their bank account where we have set up the payment for them, and it will say XY business has asked you to pay £1,000, and providing the payer recognizes that payment request, then they just hit pay, and within a few clicks it will be paid. So it is, the open banking is almost a secure messaging wrapper around the payment that still actually goes via the Faster Payments Network, which is what me and the Ordo founders used to run before we set up Ordo. And the Faster Payments Network is regulated by the Payment Systems Regulator and overseen by the Bank of England. It is critically important infrastructure for the UK, and that is run centrally. So the payment still goes from a payer's account to a business's account, and those account details are indelible and recorded and can't be changed. And just to pick up on what Wayne was saying earlier, and also Giulio on the cost of funding, and what Wayne was saying about these payment methods are in place. Open banking, as we've mentioned a lot, is real time and instant. So a business can choose 1 second before it wants to pay. And that might be on day 1 of an invoice, or it could be day 101. But the advantage of open banking is whenever a corporate chooses to pay, it only choose to pay 1 second before it actually pays. So the cost of those funds, whether you pay early or late, and obviously I'd advocate paying on time, is less because you're tying up funds for 0 amount of time, unlike with cards or direct debits, which take several days to process and go through, and which are available for no one.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody. We're out of time, but there's a couple of points that I would make. Thank you so much for your expertise, by the way, and experience. This is heavy stuff for someone like me to understand, but you've made it easy for me to understand. There are 2 things that come out of this for me. One is, at the end of the day, it's a human decision. There are still humans somewhere in the process, and those humans are still a little bit cautious about the security and needing to feel more secure with all of this. Despite everything, there needs to be more work by everyone, and I include me and others in this, to make people feel more happy and secure with using new systems. But I have learned one thing, and that is that the open banking stuff could be hugely valuable where let's say you've got a long contract and you want to sort of dribble out payments over a period of time, depending on what's going on and what changes, and make that whole thing a bit more flexible than it currently is, i.e. one size fits all and everybody gets paid in 60 days for the thing. You know, there's a lot of flexibility in there that could help big companies and small to be more flexible about that pay. But we've got a long way to go. I understand that. Listen to Fliss, Giulio and Wayne, thank you very much. Thank you for everybody for joining. And of course, most importantly, thank you to everybody that will watch this, which is many more people that are on the live today. Join us next month for Weight Watchers 4. Thank you, everybody, for joining, and goodbye.
Thanks ever so much. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.